In the rush of the modern world, we often forget the healing power of letting go. Thousands of years ago, the wise Laozi revealed the silent, flawless order behind this hustle. Today, are you ready to dive into his timeless philosophy and purify your soul with the gentle waters of the Tao? Laozi, a name lost in the mists of history, is a legendary figure whose name means the old master, and who is rumored to have been born with innate wisdom. Estimated to have lived between 570 and 490 BC, this great philosopher worked as an archive clerk during the turbulent Zhou dynasty of China. In those dark ages when society was driven into chaos and kingdoms devoured one another, he chose to observe the silence and order of the universe instead of the magnificent halls of the palace. He watched with a deep sorrow how people destroyed the world with their ambitions, and he set out on an inner journey by closing the doors of his heart to the noise of the outside world. His life is the story of a soul speaking with nature itself, far beyond an ordinary human being. According to legends, Laozi stayed in his mother's womb for 81 years and appeared in the world as an elderly sage with completely white hair when he was born. This mythological narrative symbolizes that he never lived an ordinary childhood and that his soul carried an ancient wisdom existing since the beginning of the universe. The old master became a traveler of simplicity who did not accumulate knowledge throughout his life, but instead erased everything unnecessary from his mind and heart. As he freed himself from the burden of knowledge, he grew lighter, and as he grew lighter, he began to hear the deep breath of nature more clearly. His presence was like a living temple, giving lessons to the people around him not with words, but with his posture, his silence, and his peace. Witnessing the collapse of the Zhou dynasty and the moral decay firsthand, Laozi felt a deep loneliness when he understood that this civilization could no longer be saved. Unable to bear people crushing one another for ambition, power, and wealth any longer, he set out on a silent migration journey toward the east. He took no material possessions with him, because for him the true treasure was the clarity of the mind and the peace of the heart. When he arrived at the Hangu Pass on the Chinese border with tired steps, he was stopped by the guard Yin Si there. The guard instantly sensed that this wise man was not an ordinary person and begged him to write down what he knew as a work before leaving the pass. That magnificent encounter which changed human history took place amidst the cool winds of the Hangu Pass and laid the groundwork for the birth of the Daodejing. Unable to resist the guard's persistence, Laozi withdrew to a small hut and penned that immortal text in just a few days, which would shake world philosophy. Consisting of 81 short poems, this work is a unique guide describing the secrets of the universe, the meaning of life, and the inner journey of man. After the writing was finished, Laozi moved away from there and completely lost his trace within the wild nature. Where he went and how he died was never known, but the legacy he left continued to illuminate the path of humanity as a timeless light.
At the center of Laozi's philosophy lies the concept of the Tao, which is beyond the comprehension limits of the human mind. The Tao is the source of everything, yet it is undefined itself. The Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao, because human language is limited, and it is impossible to fit the infinity of the universe into words. It is both the mother and the invisible architect of the universe. It is neither being nor non-being, but an infinite flow encompassing both. Laozi tells us that we must empty our minds to understand the Tao, because only an empty vessel can be filled with new and fresh water. This tremendous realization begins the moment a person surrenders themselves to the infinite arms of the universe. The Tao is invisible but felt everywhere. It is silent, yet it creates the greatest symphony of the universe. From the magnificent dance of the stars in the sky to the passion of rivers meeting the sea, everything is subject to the flawless law of the Tao. Laozi argued that trying to rule nature instead of living in harmony with it is the root of all suffering. Because human beings are not the masters of nature, but merely its small and delicate parts. Accepting this fact is not a weakness, but rather a universal awakening and the pinnacle of wisdom. One of the most striking and revolutionary aspects of his philosophy, the principle of wu-wei, meaning non-action, is one of the most misunderstood subjects by modern man. Wu-wei definitely does not mean doing nothing, being lazy, or turning one's back on life. Rather, it is not resisting the flow of nature. Does a river struggle, strain, or try to flow upstream to reach its sea? No, the river simply surrenders to the flow and bypasses obstacles with elegance to reach its goal. Thus, wu-wei is human beings putting aside their ego and ambition to dance with the natural rhythm of the universe. The difficulties we encounter in life are just like the rocks in front of a river. Fighting them, getting angry, and being stubborn only exhaust us. Laozi reminds us that water, despite being the softest element, erodes even the hardest rocks over time. Softness and flexibility always surpass rigidity and stubbornness, because everything that lives is flexible, while what is dead and rigid is brittle. Being like water in face of difficulties, integrating with the flow instead of resisting it, is the most fundamental feature of a sage. Therefore, no matter how fiercely the storms of life blow, trees that know how to bend remain standing.
People usually look for happiness in future great achievements, wealth, or gaining power, whereas, according to Laozi, happiness is hidden in the simplicity of the present moment. The concept of pu, the uncarved block, symbolizes man's innate, pure, unadulterated, and innocent state. Society, education, ambitions, and expectations carve this pure block, shaping it and imposing artificial identities upon us. Wisdom, however, is not constantly learning new things, but rather returning to that pure and simple essence by clearing the mind from unnecessary burdens. When we realize how little we need, we become that much richer and freer. Desires are the biggest worms gnawing at the human soul. The more things we possess, the more we become slaves to those things. Laozi reveals how the ambition of ownership restricts human freedom by saying that possessing nothing is possessing everything. While stumbling in the frenzy of consumption in the modern world, just think how cheaply we actually sell our souls. While our homes are filled with objects and our minds with worries, we completely forget to visit that silent and peaceful room inside us. True fulfillment is found not in things received from the outside, but in the depth of the inner silence. Humility in Laozi's philosophy is inspired by the humble nature of water. Water always chooses to be at the very bottom, yet it nourishes all life. Rivers and oceans position themselves at the foothills of mountains, so the water of hundreds of streams flows to them, and they become the greatest power. Similarly, a person who does not praise themselves, does not try to stand out, and does not glorify their ego wins the love and respect of everyone around them. True leadership is not managing people or putting pressure on them, but serving them and enabling them to find their own potentials. A silent guide always leaves more lasting traces than a noisy ruler. The unity of opposites forms one of the most fascinating and foundational cornerstones of Laozi's universe understanding, because existence cannot gain meaning without opposites. For beauty to exist, ugliness must be known. For goodness, evil. For long, short. This duality is not a conflict, but rather a state of flawless balance and dance. Night gives birth to day, and winter is the herald of summer. The pains and dark periods we experience in our lives are also parts of this grand cycle and allow us to appreciate joy.
You cannot reach the light without embracing the darkness, because both are two sides of the same coin.
Laozi has made very profound warnings regarding the power of words, because the saying that those who know do not speak, and those who speak do not know, is one of his most famous maxims. True truth is too big and deep to fit into the limits of language. Trying to explain it usually narrows and corrupts it. Nowadays, while everyone is racing to explain things, prove their righteousness, and make noise, the mighty power of silence has been forgotten. Silence is not merely the absence of sound, but the most sacred space where knowledge and peace brew. Sometimes the best answer that can be given is to take a deep breath without saying anything at all. The ambition for power and authority is the most dangerous poison that poisons man both spiritually and physically. Laozi reminded this to rulers and society in a harsh yet wise language. Governing a great country is like cooking a small fish. If you stir it constantly, it falls apart and breaks into pieces. Constantly imposing bans on people and keeping them under pressure makes society even more rebellious and restless. The best governance is one where the people barely feel the existence of the ruler, and everyone lives in harmony with nature through their own free will. Freedom is not a grace given from the outside, but the natural result of man making peace with his own nature. Man's helplessness against the flow of time echoes as a sad yet peaceful melody in Laozi's poems. Everything is born, grows, matures, and finally returns to where it started, to the Tao. There is no escape from this universal cycle. Leaves turning yellow in autumn and falling to the ground is not an end, but merely the silent preparation of a new spring. As man ages within this cosmic wheel, instead of fearing death, he must learn to trust this magnificent flow of life. Accepting that life is temporary is the greatest gift, enabling us to appreciate every single moment and live it deeply. Drawing attention to how our thoughts take us captive, Laozi showed ways to calm the wavy sea of the mind. The mind is just like muddy water. If you leave it alone, sediments settle to the bottom over time and the water clarifies on its own. We, on the other hand, constantly stir our minds and make them even more turbid with worries and fears. Meditation, inner silence, and staying alone with nature are the most powerful cures clarifying that muddy water. A clear mind is the mirror of the universe, and only such a mind can see clearly the reflections of the Tao. Our fears usually stem from our lack of trust in the unlived future and regrets of the past. Laozi reminds us of the sacredness of the present moment, because neither yesterday is in our hands nor tomorrow is guaranteed. We only have this breath, this second, and this miraculous moment of existence. Poisoning today with future anxiety is like throwing oneself out of a river out of fear of thirst. Staying in the present means feeling the touch of the wind on our skin and experiencing the pure joy of being. Laozi, who clearly revealed the difference between knowledge and wisdom, emphasized that reading a lot or memorization would not make a person wise. He says that a person watching the sky from their window can reach the secret of the universe without traveling the world or burying themselves in books, because true knowledge comes not from the outside in, but from the inside out, filtered from the depths of the heart. Mental accumulation can become a burden, but wisdom lightens the soul and gives wings to man. A wise person is someone who knows little but feels everything deeply. In human relations and social life, Laozi's principles possess an incredibly transformative power. He argued that responding to evil with evil only creates a chain reaction of violence, whereas goodness can transform everything. The maxim of responding with goodness is not a pure weakness, but rather the indication of the strongest character and superior consciousness. Facing anger with compassion and rudeness with elegance breaks the opponent's resistance and softens their heart. Love is the most powerful adhesive of the universe, and no wall can prevent it from passing. In Laozi's teachings, the concept of emptiness holds a central position.
The usefulness of a vessel comes from the emptiness inside it, and the usefulness of a house comes from the emptiness in the rooms. As much as material things, and even more than them, we need spiritual emptiness and silence in our lives. Being constantly busy with things and adding new things suffocates our soul, whereas creating emptiness is making room for novelty, peace, and inspiration. When we do not give space to unnecessary crowds in our minds and lives, the infinite abundance of the universe flows there. Emptiness is not absence, but the very essence of infinite potential. Society's rules, taboos, and prejudices are like shackles, pushing man away from his essence. His admiration for the pure and natural state of children shows that man's most flawless state is hidden in that period of innocence. The lies, fears, ambitions, and class differences we learn as we grow up disconnect us from our nature. Becoming like a child again and being able to look with fresh and curious eyes, as if looking at the world for the first time, is the greatest virtue. A person returning to this innocence forgets hatred and is reborn in the arms of the universe. Ambition and arrogance are two blunt knives with which man digs his own grave. Laozi always advised being humble in this regard. The higher you rise, the more humble you must be, just like the branches of a fruit tree bending down to the ground due to weight. A person who sees themselves larger than life is actually nothing more than a pathetic ego unable to realize how small they are against the infinity of the universe. Humility is not a person diminishing their own value, but rather becoming one with the universe by purging from arrogance. True greatness is not being superior to others, but being superior to your yesterday's self. Laozi knew that thin line between loneliness and being alone very well, seeing being alone not as a punishment, but as a reward. Feeling lonely amidst crowds and finding oneself in the pain and silence of nature are two completely different worlds. People who are afraid of staying alone with themselves constantly look for external approval and noise. Wisdom, however, begins with being able to love a silence deep enough to hear one's inner voice. A person who discovers that silent temple inside no longer fears any storm in the outside world. Laozi, resolving the dilemma of fate and free will with the flow of the Tao, stated that man must both surrender to fate and adapt to the flow. Rowing against the current is simply tiring and futile. What matters is harmonizing the direction of the boat with the elegance of the current. Every event experienced, whether good or bad, is a gift offered to us by the universe for our growth and evolution. Instead of rebelling against what happens to us, asking what this situation is trying to teach me is a wise perspective. Every difficulty is a diamond polished to prevent our souls from hardening.
In Laozi's philosophy, the love of nature is not an ordinary admiration, but an ontological bond. Human beings are not outside observers of nature, but its living organ. The breath of trees is our breath. The blood of rivers is the water in our veins. When we break this bond, our soul dries up. Modern man cutting ties with nature means the same thing as cutting ties with his own roots and leads to a deep identity crisis. Stepping on the soil, feeling the wind, watching the stars is not just a hobby, but the essential nourishment of the soul. The moment we reconnect with nature, our disconnected bonds with the universe heal automatically. Touching upon the illusions created by the concepts of success and failure in the human mind, Laozi emphasized that both states are temporary. Both praise and blame are winds coming from the outside. If you become a straw in the wind, you get blown away in every breeze. One must not rejoice and spoil with success, nor grieve and collapse with failure, but remain stable and unshakable like a mountain. Life is not a result, but an endless journey. In this journey, neither the destination nor what is left behind matters. What matters is enjoying that moment and the walk with every step you take.
Influencing millions of people across generations, the Daodejing continues to guide from the business world to psychology even today. Leaders, artists, and souls in search find their own answers in Laozi's lines because what he says defies time. That ancient frequency hidden between words evokes a different tone in the heart of everyone who reads it. This book is not an ordinary philosophical work, but a magical key that awakens the soul and carries man to the center of the universe. Reading it is like encountering the first sunlight leaking from a cave thousands of years old. Every moment we get tired from the chaos of life and the noise of our mind, Laozi's calming voice comes to our rescue and invites us to stop. Stop, take a breath, look around you and trust that everything will happen in its own time, says that wise master. Our impatience, haste, and desire to control everything turn our life into a hell. Yet when a seed falls to the ground, it does not bloom immediately. It waits in the dark, brews, and attains light when the right time comes. We too must respect our own time and the cycle of nature in our lives.
Laozi's legacy is a tremendous guide whispering to us not only how to live, but also how to die in peace. Living fearlessly, accepting what life brings like a river, and seeing every breath as a miracle is his greatest gift. Leaving behind a calm heart remembered with love rather than grand palaces when departing from the world is the most precious legacy. Laozi came like the wind, left a mark and disappeared within an invisible river, blending into eternity. Now it is our turn. It is time to find our own silence and our own Tao on the path he opened. And finally, as we come to the end of this fascinating journey, let us make Laozi's eternal call echo again in our ears and hearts. Everything flows, everything changes, but the essence remains the same. Sometimes the greatest action is doing nothing and simply surrendering to the flow, because a river always knows the way to reach the sea. Silence the noise within you, let your mind clear, and glide peacefully in the soft arms of the flow. Remember that the greatest journey is not the one made outward, but that silent journey a person makes into the depths of their own soul. Laozi's wise philosophy, carried from thousands of years ago to the present day, is like a cool spring for our souls lost in the chaos of the modern world. The traces he left behind will continue to be the safest harbor we can take refuge in during life's storms. Thank you for watching.